One of the first things I did was I sat down the leadership team, and then I went next to the technical team. And I basically said to them all, I'm not sure what to do, and I need your help, right? Because I'm not the technical person. I know people. I could keep the people side, the customers happy, the operations running of the business. But the actual development of the software and the enhancements there, or if something went wrong, or, I needed them to take the reins on that. And so I was just very honest. It could have totally backfired on me, but it didn't. And so I've had to rely on people. And I really think that is the difference in what allowed us to grow is I had to let go. I didn't have a choice. Whereas my brother was so smart and so technical. And so he wanted to be in all of it because he understood all of it. I don't understand it all always.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, John Moncrief, and my guest today is Elizabeth Glasbrenner. And this conversation is a really special one for me. Elizabeth, to a large extent, inspired this podcast and the book that I'm working on. It was her story that first set me off on this journey, connecting a whole string of dots from past roles and experiences and bringing them together in this podcast. But anyway, Elizabeth's the CEO of Smiley Technologies, a company that provides banking software and services to community banks and financial institutions. It's also a family business with a legacy that stretches back about 5 decades or over 5 decades. So in 2002, when Elizabeth co-founded the company alongside her brother Vance and their father Walter had already brought all sort of 3 decades of experience by then. So Vance comes in and he's this gritty, determined leader who built the business from the ground up. But in 2016, things had kind of plateaued at around 4 million. So that's when Elizabeth steps in. And within a few years, she's driven the company toward 20 million in revenue and built a lot more value in the business. Her leadership style was different. Where Vance had led through the hustle and the persistence that was required in startup stage, Elizabeth brought, I think, empathy and trust and a people-first mindset that really helped the business to scale. But her journey wasn't easy. She had to overcome imposter syndrome. She had to build trust within the team. She had to navigate some very real personal challenges. Her husband, high-performing athlete and amputee, was 2 months off climbing Mount Everest before she took over the helm. Her daughter Grace was battling serious health issues, requiring Elizabeth to be constantly present, literally keeping her alive. Elizabeth's story is of courage, of vulnerability, and what real leadership looks like when the stakes are personal. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. I absolutely love Elizabeth's story, and I'm glad I get to share it with you. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. It's fabulous to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
I thought to actually frame this one up, and I want to the audience who are listening. Elizabeth, you're part of the inspiration for the show. It was at Small Giants where I heard you speak the first time and told your story about taking a business that had kind of been bumping its head at a revenue plateau and just kind of this hockey stick growth. But what was so amazing for me was the shift in the type of leadership, how going from one leader had taken a business to a level, and then how you came in and took it to a whole new level. What was going on in your own life personally, and some of the toxicity perhaps in the business that you had to navigate, and just stepping up and taking over those reins, and I think the support that your family showed you as well.
For sure.
So there's almost these insurmountable challenges, and I want to thank you for the inspiration there. But maybe to start with, do you mind sharing a bit of your story and taking over Smiley Technologies?
Sure. When I was a kid, let me start there because I think it's important. My father ran a business called Systematics, which was really the pioneer to outsourcing data processing for banks. So what they did was they ran the software and provided the services to handle all of the transaction processing that happens in a bank. And that company grew and went public and then sold in the early 90s when I was just graduating high school. And so I saw that progression of that business, and I saw how my father, the grit he had and the way he treated people. And so all of that was part of my upbringing. I also saw what happened when the company went public and then when he sold and had, got out. So I lived through all of that. And then in about 2002, a bank that my dad was on the board of was having trouble with their core processor and asked him to see it, what do we do about this? We feel like we need to move. How do we do that? And he enlisted the help of my brother and I to do a review of all the core systems out there for banks. And at that time, it was really the big, there's three or four big multi-billion-dollar public companies that sort of dominate this space. And so we did a review just like any consultant would do. And we looked at price and we looked at services and products. And what we found was moving from one big software company to another big software company, you might get a new product here or a different service here, but the pain of putting a bank through that and the customers, because it's a huge endeavor to convert a bank core processing system. The pain of putting them through it probably wasn't worth it if you were just going from one big one to another big one. And so being the entrepreneurial family that we were, we thought, well, what if we could just provide the service in between the bank and the core system? Because we understand the language on both sides. And if we just sort of stepped in the middle and said, let us handle that part for you. You go be a banker, handle your communities in the ways that you need to, and let us take the headache from you. And this bank said, well, if your dad watches you and makes sure you don't screw it up, we'll be your first customer.
Okay.
So we actually started, it's an interesting, it was probably brilliant and we didn't even know we were doing it, but starting with a service before we had a product was ideal because we had revenue coming in. And so about, 6 or 8 months into it, we realized we didn't have any more leverage than they did over getting anything done. And we saw firsthand the headaches of trying to get things done in a small to medium-sized community bank with a big multi-billion-dollar company. So we probably pretty naively, my brother by nature is a builder. He loves to build things and prototype things and solve problems for people. And so he said, let's just hire some programmers and we'll do our own. And it was, again, probably really naive to think we could do that. But we thought 3 or 4 years of development, we'd have a core system. And we're 23 years into this and we're still building. So you always will at a software company. But it's I think he definitely had I use the word grit a lot because I think, number one, in a technology business, number two, in a startup, I think you've just got to have that all hands on deck feeling and willing to do anything to get things over the hurdles that we had.
And that you needed that type of leadership to start with, that gritty kind of A-type personality. We did. To get the business off the ground, right? And it was really a beautiful relationship we had because he wanted to be the leader and I did not. And so it was really a nice synergy. We weren't competing for the leadership job. I really enjoyed the people and service side of the business and he really enjoyed the technical side of the business. And so it just was a really great partnership that we had. And if I remember right, your dad was still coming into the office. I think at the time he still does. Still, he's 87 now, and he's still Walter. He's still in and out of the office. Okay. Yep. So you get the business off the ground. You grow the business for a good few years. What was about 8 years or so? It was actually about 10 or 11 years. Yeah. It hit a plateau, and it's kind of. It did, and I think part of our problem was we just kept building. We didn't focus on sales. We didn't look at how to actually grow the business. It was just, we were organically growing at small increments, which was great. And we had paychecks and we were having fun and we didn't have any debt. And so it was a great sort of lifestyle business, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think, we hit a place where if you're not making any money, a lot of profit, you can't invest back in the business and you can't continue to grow without taking outside money. And we didn't really want to do that. So I also think my brother's affinity for building
he just stayed focused on building. And we just kept building instead of selling.
Was there that sense of purpose that we often talk about, particularly in small giants, and that sense of kind of long-term vision at that stage? Or was the focus really on let's just build something and kind of looking inward more than outward?
I think it was definitely the latter. I've thought a lot about this whole purpose question lately, because trying to articulate that to 100 employees, which is about where we are now, is really hard, and the words matter. And I think what I've come to believe is so much of the purpose conversation is just an intrinsic value that people have or they don't. Mm-hmm. And you can talk about it all day long, and you can preach it, and you can say, this is how we're going to behave, and all that's important. And I want to do that. But to me, the key's really been to hire people that just genuinely believe they're supposed to do the right thing. It's really no deeper than that, right? You find a group of people that all believe they're supposed to just do the right thing for our customers, for each other, for our vendors. And it seems to just work. Now, we have to write it down and we have to articulate it. But we didn't do a lot of that. We had core values and we had the things that all companies have. But again, my brother and I were just the kind of people, and my dad taught us this, right? We took care of people. We took care of our customers. We did the right thing. We didn't cheat anybody. We didn't, we slept well at night. Yeah. And it just worked.
And then you get to a point where one day you get a phone call and your dad says that your brother is on his way out. He's leaving the business. Was it Vance?
Vance, yeah.
Vance is leaving the business. He's on his way out.
Yeah. He had hit a place where the building wasn't enough.
Okay.
The company had gotten just big enough. We were about 20, maybe 18 to 20 employees at the time. We had a few customers, and the actual running of the business was interfering with his ability to build and make change.
So you got to that point where the business was actually becoming a business. It was something that now needed real leadership and not.
He just didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay.
So you get the phone call, and you have some personal challenges that you have to overcome. But your dad has said it's your sort of time to step up. And were you in HR at the time, Elizabeth?
No, I mean, I ran the whole, think of operations, people side, HR, okay. But I managed all of customer support, the finance group. So that whole area of the non-technical side of the business, if you will, that was what I was running. So
you had a difficult challenge in making that decision.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, because like we were saying before, there's so many excuses or reasons why we can't do things. But if you're comfortable sharing,
sure,
the challenges that you were going through at that time.
I think number one, I had small kids. I was a woman in technology, and I didn't really understand all the technology. I knew people. That was what I was good at, and nobody ever tells you, and I don't know if it's a woman thing or not, but nobody ever tells you can't be, or at least nobody ever told me I couldn't be the leader of a company, right? But it never occurred to me that I should want that or that I did want it. And so when the opportunity presented itself, my immediate reaction was, I don't want that responsibility. I don't have time for that. That's not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so I had to do a lot of self-reflection with my dad and my brother and my husband and all the people that supported me. They all believed it was the right thing, and I just couldn't see it. It didn't feel right to me. But they convinced me that I should try it, and that if it didn't work out, that we could figure it out, something else. And I think what it really came down to for me is I realized I didn't want to work for anybody else.
Okay.
Because I had it'd been 12 years of us running our own business. And then I didn't want to give up on all the people that I had made promises to, all the employees and the customers and the things that, because in my mind, it was either like I was going to take over or I was going to leave altogether.
Okay.
And that was I don't know why that felt like my only two options in my brain, but
was that potentially then the end of the business if you were to leave? If your brother's gone,
I mean, it's a solid business. Somebody as long as we found somebody to run it, it would have probably been fine. But yeah, so I had a lot of internal, I don't know, people call it imposter syndrome today. Like, I just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think people would respect me as the leader because I wasn't technical. My brother was so good at what he did. That was what I saw as the leader model. And I knew I couldn't be that. And so that I had a lot of insecurity about whether I could do it and whether people would respect me as the leader.
I mean, we both have daughters, and listening to what you're saying at the moment, my sort of middle daughter's about the same age as Grace, and Courtney is a little bit older. But that comment you made about women not being sort of told this is something that you can do. Do you think that's something that's still a challenge, or?
I do. I think I don't think we do enough reminding our daughters and our sisters and our, all those people that it's okay to, and you should want more and more, it doesn't mean don't be happy in where you are and you should always be ladder climbing. That's not, it's more just like if the opportunity presents itself, how do we help these women have the confidence to go try it? Because it's really a confidence issue.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not a true feminist. Like I don't go I'm an advocate, but I'm not like loud about it. But I do think men have just a quiet confidence about them in general that can go just sort of do it. Yeah. Women tend to really overthink it and try to find all the reasons not to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Or at least I did. I shouldn't generalize, but I did.
I mean, it makes sense. And I think it's something I've been conscious of with my daughters is you can, if that opportunity arises, you have the ability to grab it with both hands and run
there's
with
there's a lot of guilt too, especially if you have a family and you have children that there's a lot of guilt in I'm not spending enough time at home. I'm not spending enough time with my husband. I'm not spending enough time in the business. And I think women feel that more than men in general.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think you're probably very spot on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, but
it felt like a choice to me, right? I had to pick one or the other rather than trying to figure out how to make it all work.
But you found that balance, and in a very difficult situation, you found that balance in kind of between family and taking the business on. But there were challenges inside the business as well. Mm-hmm. And if I remember from Small Giants time, you sort of take the business from about 4 million odd to nearly 20 million through a pandemic as well on top of everything. So there's this change of leadership.
Yeah.
And you were the right person to come in, and I'm sure there were people who supported you along the way, but you make the decision and you take over the reins. I'm curious about what's going through your mind as you come into the business and what you're sort of thinking about as first day on the job, I'm now the CEO.
I was terrified.
What do I do?
Yeah, I was terrified. I had one of the first things I did was I sat down the leadership team, and then I went next to the technical team, and I basically said to them all, I'm not sure what to do.
Okay.
And I need your help, right? Because I'm not the technical person. I know people. I could keep the people side, the customers happy, the operations running of the business, but the actual development of the software and the enhancements there, or if something went wrong, or, I needed them to take the reins on that. And so I was just very honest. It could have totally backfired on me, but it didn't. They actually stepped up most of them in a lot of ways, to help, to say, we got this, don't worry about it.
So it was actually that act of kind of being vulnerable, getting naked, as Patrick Lencioni would say. Kind of, okay, this is where we're at. This is how I feel.
And I've done that a lot in my career, because I think when a leader comes in and pretends like they know it all, like, I just think that's a recipe for disaster, because they don't. There's no way to know it all. And you've got to have people around you that can. Now, when you're small, you can manhandle it, right? But as it starts to grow and you've got all these competing priorities between people, that becomes a balancing act for sure.
You did have some challenges coming in. There was some toxicity that you had to deal with. And I think while you told us about that at the conference, you did something different from most leaders in a way, in that it took you a while, but you did act fairly quickly.
I did, yeah.
Which is something most leaders will kind of let something carry on for forever and ever. But
I do think I let it carry on too long. I had a senior technical leader that it's kind of a long story. I was living in Colorado at the time for some health reasons for my daughter. And so I was trying to manage the business from a remote distance, and he lived here, and sort of I think he was, in my mind, my right-hand person running the Little Rock office. And he began to undermine me in the leadership role, and I didn't know it was happening. And so I trusted him immensely, and I was scared to death to not have him. Right. And he made me feel that way. I mean, he would tell me all the time, you can't do this without me. And so it was a little bit of a mind game going on that I didn't even realize. And I was so afraid of not having. I mean, how do you run a technical business without a senior technical leader? And how was I going to go interview for a new one? Right. Because I didn't have. So I had all of this self-doubt in my mind of, you got to just take whatever it is because you can't lose him. And I think that is, if I could give anybody advice, from what I've learned over 23 years, is everybody's replaceable, including me. And the fear around that can paralyze people to a point that's bad for the business and bad for the other employees. And I let that go on probably too long, looking back on it. But once I hit a place, I mean, it got to a place where he really gave me no choice. And what I realized was I was damaging the other employees by letting it go on, and because it was just toxic. And so I fired him. And about every Friday for the next 2 months, somebody else or two people would quit. And so he had amassed this sort of following inside the company. And
you still at around 25 odd people. So this is a big impact on the business where
we lost about 30% of our employees in this ordeal, and in a span of about a month or two. And so it was scary, but almost became comical at some point, right? Because it was just like, okay, what's going to happen this Friday, and this group of people that he had sort of gathered this following under the covers that was happening. Looking back on it, it was all the right. It happened exactly how it should have. It just was really hard on me personally, and hard on the other employees because they had to pick up the slack of the people that were just quitting. And so about the fourth or fifth Friday, I'd had enough. And the next week, we're in a business that can't close because we do processing for banks. So as long as the banks are open, we have to provide, we have to provide transaction processing for people, people to get their balances and their payments. And so I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I had just come back from a tugboat summit, and I told my staff, I put a calendar invite on everybody's calendar. And I said, this is back when everybody was still in the office. This was about January of 2020. I said,
so this is just before we go into COVID as well.
Yeah, maybe February. It was right before COVID.
Okay.
But I put a meeting on everybody's calendar, and we called them all in the conference room, and I said I was going to go over the tugboat summits that show them some of the stuff that I had learned at the summit. And I called my brother and I called my dad and I called our biggest customers at the time. And I just said, here's what I'm going to do. I need your help answering phones. I need some grace from our customers. Our employees need a break.
Yeah.
And everybody was so gracious. And we got in the conference room and I told everybody, I said, go get what you need for the day. We're leaving. And everybody was like, what? And we walked outside and I had rented one of those big tour buses. And I told everybody in the parking lot, I said, we're not having any more of this look back. We're not having any more people walk out. If you don't want to go forward with us, then don't get on the bus. Because once we do this today, we're not looking back. We're going forward. And we had one guy not get on the bus. He was the last one. and everybody else got on and we went out for the day. We took a couple of laptops just in case there were any problems. But, we went out and we just played for the day. We went bowling and we went and had lunch and we played arcade games and we just had a really fun day. And it totally reset the whole environment for us going forward.
And I mean, something I loved about that was like Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus.
Yeah.
And
everybody's heard that, right?
Got the right people on the bus, pointing the bus in the direction.
Enough already. I was done with it. So I will belabor something for a really long time. But once I hit a point where I feel confident I've done what I need to do, I can take a pretty hard stance.
Yeah. And so after that, the team, you're now left with sort of 20 odd people on your team
or less.
And it's time to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. And luckily we had some people that we had hired on staff. One guy in particular that was not his role, but he had the talent to be our chief technology officer. And I went to him and I said, do you know how to do this? He said, I do. And I said, okay. And he said, I got you. And so ever since then, we've been rebuilding our team and trying to get the right people. And we've been through several other unfortunate hires and things that were just hard, but everybody goes through that. I feel, but it was at that moment you really see who steps up and who steps out. I drew the line.
So important, just getting the right people onto the team.
It's amazing how one person can ruin it for everybody. And it's the leader's responsibility to get them out, to identify it and get them out.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
I mean, I feel like the big barriers to growth are sort of people and leadership, getting the right leadership team in place. And you were saying earlier that being able to, even you're sort of indispensable and basically building that team that can take the business forward and run it without you ultimately.
And I think, I think that one of the beauties of me not being a technical person is that I'm not in every little detail of the business.
Yeah.
And while I love the business and I love being in it, there's some things I can't be in. And so I've had to rely on people. And I really think that is the difference in what allowed us to grow is I had to let go. I didn't have a choice. Whereas my brother was so smart and so technical. And so he wanted to be in all of it because he understood all of it. I don't understand it all always.
It's really interesting. You actually had no option. You had to let go and you had to build a team around you. There was no choice.
Right.
So
I don't know that I did anything brilliant other than just say, I can't do it. I need your help.
You had to surround yourself with people who were sort of smarter than you in their specific areas and then unleash them and let them do what they do best.
And I had to get enough confidence that they respected me as the leader, even though I didn't have all that knowledge.
I'm curious about how you did that. How did you build that confidence? Is it just something that built over time, or how did you do that?
I think a couple of things. My daughter has quite a bit of health issues with a seizure disorder, and she was a real grounding force for me, good or bad. When I would go home at night, if I wasn't present with her, she literally would fall.
Okay.
It's really no deeper than that.
Yeah.
And I think it forced me to be present with my family. And so I think having that grounding force in my life of what's really important was super helpful in that building that confidence of like, you know what, all this is great and the business is fun and we're doing well, but this is what's really important. And so that really helped me. And I teach in our new hire orientation, all of our new employees, I talk about that grounding force. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but to find out whatever that is that reminds you what's important in life. Business is important and the work is important, but it's not more important than your life or your family or your, and so that was one piece. And then I think the other piece, I've done a couple of things. So in my office, you can't see it, but I have a collage of mountains that I've climbed.
Okay.
And pictures of me on time. And so it really reminds me that I can do hard things. And then I often keep a copy of our financials and that graph that I showed you.
Yes.
And whenever I start feeling like overwhelmed of I'm not doing a good job, I pull that out. And
this is what I'm capable of.
I think, okay, we are doing a good job. Stop the self-talk. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, I still to this day have to remind myself it doesn't go away. You just get better at handling it.
But you figured out some ways that you can do that. So climbing mountains, doing those really tough things, getting to the top and keeping that collage up there. That picture of the financials was phenomenal as well, where you see the business. For audience listening, you could see the business going along at 4 million and it's a kind of lifestyle business at that stage. But there's 2016, was it when you came in, or have I got the date? 26?
I think that's about right. Yeah.
Where you come into the business and then we have that sort of hockey stick growth that everybody talks about.
Yeah.
And I imagine to a large extent was about the right people.
I think it was the right
leadership.
I think it was the right people. I think we let the business go a little bit, right? It was churning to go. We wanted to sell, and we just, it was making the opportunity for some of those things to happen and letting the people do what they knew was right.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Tugboat Institute a little bit earlier, and I thought to sort of dive into that. I mean, Smiley Technologies is a family business, roots sort of with the work that your father did in the past. It sounds like your brother and your father's still involved and family's involved. There's input.
My son's going to intern here this summer. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So really a family business, but how are you looking to the future and how are you thinking about that in terms of the business?
I think about it a lot, actually. I don't have like this emotional need for my son to take over and it stay a family business. And, I don't have that feeling. Yeah. What I do have is that this is a good, solid business where employees can grow. They can have a future. This business weathers recessions and COVID and things that really well because banks are our customers and banks pay their bills on time. And it's a needed thing and it's a service business and we have long-term contracts and we have recurring revenue and all the things that at the time I didn't do any of this on purpose, but the business is a really good business just in the world. And so I have this feeling that it's a safe space for employees to come here and all the noise of the world, especially right now, is a lot. This is sort of an island for them to come to and enjoy their day and talk to nice people and deal with nice customers and sort of get out of that mayhem. And so I have this desire long-term for that to continue.
Okay.
It's less about it being a family business, but whoever takes over, I hope that culture and that feeling of longevity and the place for people resonates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you've created a space where people actually want to come
to work.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I tell myself that every day. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think so.
But you must be quite intentional then about the customers you choose as well. Just kind of the people we want to work with. And do you intentionally think about making sure that we talk about ideal customer profiles and all those kind of things in marketing, but being very selective of the customers and how they tie into your culture and core values? I'm curious about how you think about that.
We think about that a lot as well. And then we talk about it a lot in the sales process. And we tell prospects, if you want a vendor that you just call up and bark orders to, we're not your choice. If you want the cheapest option on the block, we're not the choice, right? If you don't want us questioning why you're doing something, because we are the experts at what we do, you're the experts at what you do. If you don't like us question, a banker will call up and say, I need a report that does X, Y, Z. And we'll say, why? What are you doing? Right? Because we might have a better way to solve it. And so we teach that a lot around here. And so we talk about, if you don't like to be questioned, we're not the vendor for you. And we've actually pulled out of sales deals before where we feel that it's not going to be a good fit and that we can't make them happy. And that's a tough, it's a liberating place to be, that we can do that we have the luxury to do that. But it's also interesting to watch our employees be like, we're not going to take that one. I'm like, no, we're not going to take that one. They didn't treat us right.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fun place to be, that we don't have to take every customer.
I mean, do you follow a sort of growth plans strategy? Do you have, this is where we're going in the next sort of, well, that's our core purpose. That's where we're going in the next 10 years. This is where we want to be in 3 years. These are the kind of what
it's funny
we're trying to achieve every quarter, or how do you think?
I mean, we're not beholden to outside shareholders, so we don't have to report quarterly earnings, or we can make those decisions how we want to. We can get a feel for if people are tired. Do we need to slow down a little bit? Do we need, and we had several years of, 30% growth or more. And that was hard. This year's going to be more flat, just because we did lose a customer. It was a mutual decision. But that's going to cause us to be a little more flat. But that was a decision we all made together. And we said, we know this is what's going to happen this year, but we're also a little bit tired. We had such good growth for so long. But I felt like as the leader, I needed to put that goalpost out there, but I'm beginning to change my mind on that and say, what we want is good organic growth. We want 2 or 3 really good customers a year to onboard.
Yeah.
So that we can absorb the loss of one if we ever do lose one. But I think it's to continue to provide good jobs and to be that safe space and to just organically grow so we can invest back in the business and pay people more and all of those things, and explore things with AI or different, things that we want to go look at.
It's not growth for the sake of growth. I mean, I remember going through that as well. 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, and suddenly all you're doing is just chasing numbers, and it can be soul destroying, and it's not healthy for the business either.
And I've had an employee ask me one time, to what end are we doing this?
Yeah.
And I was like, why does there have to be an end? I don't know what it is. I mean, somebody may come in here, and if they offer me the right amount of money, we might talk about it. But I think I don't have an end in mind, if that makes sense. My dad used to always say, we don't have voicemail and we don't have an exit strategy. It's just, it's kind of how we operate, and people, it's unnerving for people because it's not how the world works, but nothing really about what we do is the same as everybody else. So
what attracted you to the Tugboat Institute then? How did that kind of fit into your thinking?
It was interesting. They did a webinar, it's been 5 or 6 years ago, with a group at the college I went to for undergrad. And they sent out an email saying, we're doing this webinar. And I had a girl that was working for me at the time. And I asked her, would she go listen to it? Because we both went to the same college. And I said, would you go listen to this and tell me what it's about? I'm just curious. And she came back and she said, you need to call these people. They think a lot like you do. Like just the narrative of people first and, profit's important, but do it pragmatically and persevere through things and all the things, the 7 Ps that they talk about.
Yeah.
And she's like, you should call them. So I called them and we had a nice conversation and turns out it's a community of people that think like I do in terms of how to run the business, that it's not about chasing that in goalpost all the time. It's about providing a place for your employees and providing space for your customers and just doing that in a long-term thinking way.
And being intentional about the growth, like not just for the sake of it.
It was enlightening, especially in the space I'm in, because in technology and especially financial technology over the last 5 years, there has been this huge influx of dollars in venture capital and private equity. And I mean, I get hit 5 or 6 times a week from people wanting to invest because there aren't that many core systems out there. And
yeah, I can imagine.
It's a piece that a lot of people want. And so, but it's just the thought of having to answer to someone else or change our growth strategy because I've got to give someone a payout in 5 years, or that just doesn't resonate with me. And that I would not be the person to run this business if that was the model. And I've told my board that. I've told her, if that's what people want to do, that's fine, but I'm not the one to run it then.
Yeah, it almost goes back to what you were saying earlier when it came that sort of decision point of whether you were going to stay in the business when your brother left or not. I
had to do it my way.
You have to do it your way. Yeah. And that's,
yeah. So Tugboat's been a great, it's probably, you talk about confidence. It's probably helped my confidence a lot to be around leaders from, frankly, all over the world, for sure, nationwide, that all want the same for their people and their customers and have the same struggles. And even though we're in all different industries, and it's been really nice to have a group of people that all sort of deal with the same stuff.
Kind of get each other, and you can be vulnerable and have good conversations and share and learn from one another.
Yeah.
Talking about learning, I often ask, given where we are at the moment and everything that's going on in the economies and around the world, I suppose, what some advice is that you would pass on to an entrepreneur? But I'm thinking specifically to women entrepreneurs and young women. What's something that you'd share with them now, some advice that wisdom that you could pass down, having given what you've done over the last few years?
Yeah, I think the first, especially in the entrepreneurial world, I think first it's hard. It's running a business is not all glamorous, right? You're the one that has to plunge the toilet when it overflows when you're small, and there's just a lot of hidden things in running a business that aren't all glamorous. So that's the first one is understand what you're getting into.
It's not this as you say, it's not this glamorous thing you're going
right.
to.
There's a lot of freedom to it, right? There's a lot of benefits, but it takes a long time to get to that freedom.
Yeah.
Because you are the one that has to deal with it. I would say a business that has long-term contracts and recurring revenue is, especially in these uncertain times, the way the tariffs and all that volatility, we don't feel any of that because of the structure of how we bill. So if there's a way to have a business that has that structure and payments, that's ideal. Because our contracts are 5 to 10 years long, so I can plan out at least 5 years, which most businesses don't have that luxury.
Wow.
I can plan for people and resources for 4 or 5 years out pretty comfortably and hit it pretty close because I know what the bills are.
Yeah.
So that's another sort of safeguard, if you will, in having not so much volatility. But the women's side, I think it's really just finding people around you. And in my case, they were all men, right? That were super supportive. So it doesn't have to be a women's group I think it's just finding the people that will advocate for you and push you beyond what you think you can do.
Yeah.
And at least even say, what do you mean? Of course you can do this. Like, at least be open to hearing that. And if an opportunity presents itself, I say, take it. You can always change it.
Yeah. I think it was something that kind of, I remember from your talk was that you went to the bar with your husband, you had that conversation. He was 2 months away from climbing Mount Everest.
Yep.
And then on top of that, he'd lost his leg in a farming accident when he was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
But he's sitting down with you 2 months from climbing this mountain and saying to you, you got this, Elizabeth. You can do this. We can do this.
Yeah.
And I think that was just so powerful that there's people, as you say, you surround yourself with people that can believe in you.
Oh, yeah.
People who support you and lift
will
your
push
confidence.
you a little bit. Yeah. It takes people pushing other people, I think, to move to move anything forward. And that belief, sometimes you don't always believe it in yourself. You may have to hear it from other people to get that jump started.
One thing I ask as well, sort of at the end of every episode, and you talked a little bit about it earlier, and freedom, but the podcast is the freedom experience. I'm curious about what freedom means to you, Elizabeth, and yeah.
I think for me, especially given the health issues with my daughter, I think for me, freedom is just sort of when my mind can be at peace. And again, women especially, like, I think we overthink everything and we overanalyze things and just overthink it. And when I can get my mind to just calm down, that's what freedom feels like to me. And so having people around me at work that can handle things and then my daughter's doing much better at home now. And like, there's just a general peace in me right now, which feels really good. And I think whatever that is, that's what I'm going to continue searching for, because it's a calmness, right?
Yeah. And I can remember when you spoke, you were talking about your daughter. It was almost like having to be there to make sure she stayed alive. I mean, it was. Yeah. I mean,
and then you're running a business, you're on all day long for everybody, right? People need you all day long. And then you go home and you're needed. And it's like, you might get several hours of sleep, with one eye open, wondering, is your daughter going to be alive the next morning when you wake up? Like, so there was just this I felt like there was just constant need from everywhere. And part of that was pressure I put on myself. Nobody expected me to take on that burden of everything. Right. So that's part of what I did to myself. And I think I've had to give myself a break, really, and just be like, other people can handle this.
I loved how you talked about sort of letting your mind kind of be still and finding that peace. And that's beautiful. Yeah.
It's not, it took me 20 years to get here. It doesn't come naturally, but I'm here to say you can do it.
I'm glad you found this, and at least you're there at the moment. And that's, I suppose that's what, we're going back to that, being entrepreneurs and building a business. If you can get to that place where you found peace, you're surrounded by family, the people you care about, then it starts making it worthwhile. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
You've inspired this podcast, and I just, for a long time, have wanted to have you on the show and to talk about your journey. And I really appreciate you coming on, Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's been nice.
That's it for today's episode. Big thanks to Elizabeth Glasbrenner for joining me and for sharing what it really takes to step into leadership, rebuild trust, and to create a business that prioritizes people and purpose over the sort of pressure of growth. If this conversation got you thinking about your own leadership journey, whether you're navigating a tough transition or building something for the long haul or trying to find a sense of calm in the chaos, take a moment to reflect on the kind of business that you actually want to build. One that works for you, for your people, your customers, and for your life. And if you're enjoying these conversations, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Give us a rating. Ideally, I'd love to see a 5 there, but it helps us to get to more people like you, helps to bring the show to more guests, and helps on entrepreneurs. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.